Content of one form or another from 4 or 5 different countries.
Ed Schweitzer founded Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories in 1982. The company designs and manufactures products that help run electric power systems all over the world.
There's probably 50 different countries' hard work going into the components that we use.
He invited us to the Pullman campus to talk tariffs and the impact of the Trump administration's trade policy on his bottom line.
These tariffs stunt the growth of business. And because they're such a regressive tax, that they're particularly harmful in doing so. The other thing they do is they harm international relationships.
Schweitzer says his company could be paying as much as $110 million a year in tariffs.
Means of taxation by tariffs is probably one of the most economically destructive taxes I can imagine.
But even estimating the loss is tricky these days.
So this is a moving target. So I like to make the joke that President Trump did get.
Okay. Hey, good morning, everybody. It's one of the best days on the calendar when cutoff is passed. Jamie Peterson from the Senate Democrats, and I have Senator Dingra here with me. We, I think, are very happy that what we set out to do in the first half of session, we have made good progress on. So as a reminder, our first priority was to try to protect folks in Washington from the Trump administration. We passed some major legislation along those lines, including the mask ban, the protection of private spaces, schools and daycares from ICE agents. We have made good progress on affordability, which was the second pillar for us, including bills such as Senator Alvarado's bill to expand housing in commercial and mixed-use zones. We had another Alvarado bill that capped interest on medical debt, and a bill that came up just on Monday, well, two bills on Monday, I guess I would mention. One, a Christian Dawson bill that has to do with expanding the senior property tax exemption. And the biggest since the one that Senator Dingra did a few years ago. And then, of course, the millionaire's tax, which really hits kind of on all of the themes for us, in addition to sort of protecting us and our budget from the caprice of the federal government. It is helping with affordability, and obviously has a bunch of help both for the working families tax credit and the small business credit increases. And then in addition, on the Senate floor, we added some provisions about sales tax on services being phased out. So lots of good work in the first half, and now we have a whole set of good bills that our friends in the House have sent over to us and are beginning to process. So look forward to working collaboratively with them on getting a bunch of stuff across the finish line.
I think we're in the similar situation, are very pleased with bills we were able to move off of the House floor. We moved 190, almost 200 bills off the House floor. Around 80% of them had some level of bipartisan support. We had good work in a bipartisan way. I think this year on a number of bills across the floor that helped them move in a really collaborative way. So I think that was great. I'm not ever sure, like, if the football metaphor is quite right, because we're in halftime, but we're both winning. So it's not like we're we're switching sides, moving the ball different directions, and excited to be able to get good Senate bills, and having sent really great, I think, House bills over to the Senate. Our priorities really were very similar to the Senate priorities, making sure that we're stopping the overreach of the feds in Washington, and then working on affordability issues. So in terms of, we're happy to get a number of those Senate bills that Senator Peterson mentioned they had, but we have also like a couple Ortiz Self bills that we moved across the floor. One requiring employers who get notice that the federal government, particularly ICE, will be coming to their work site, that they need to give their workers notice of that. And a second one around the detention facility that's housed in my district, and making sure that they comply with food and safety requirements. So that's come over. And Edwin Obrist had a good bill that we're hoping will be well received in the Senate about not allowing people to falsely present as a law enforcement officer. So that's kind of some of the work that we did in the immigration and federal overreach space. And then on affordability, we just had a real plethora of bills. But some of them, Dan Bernowski's bill on access to preventive services, we moved the Peterson step housing bill, which will allow more housing to be built in the space of in cities to make sure that we have permanent supportive housing for people that's available. Rep. Farivar had a bill on grocery stores and making sure that when grocery stores close, there aren't covenants that prohibit another grocery store from opening in a community. Both she and I have had this happen in our community, as have others had that happen. The data center bill that Beth Dolio has been working on has come to the Senate, and then Charlotte Mena also had a bill on providing relief for low-income families as energy prices have risen. So that's just kind of a sample of that. I'm happy to say that we're in a good space and are excited about bills that the Senate have sent over, and are excited about the bills that we have sent to the Senate. So more work to do, but less time to do it in. So we're going to have to, we're going to be sprinting for the rest of this session, I think.
Can you explain what happened on the JR bill in the House and why that didn't move forward?
It didn't have the votes.
Was there a specific reason for that?
I think it's a plethora of reasons. I think the good thing about it is I think we had increased support from last year to this year for the bill. And we also had a lot of increased engagement with the stakeholder community as we built that bill out. So this is a place where it takes time. I often tell people that I came to the legislature as somebody who'd worked on LGBTQ civil rights. It took us 29 years to get them in statute. It will not take that much time for the JR bill to move, but it just takes time to do the incremental work to build the support to make sure we can answer all the questions that local governments have and things like that, and we'll continue to work on the bill.
The governor yesterday said that the millionaire's tax is, quote, not close to what he's hoping for. He laid out some suggestions, sales tax holiday, the diapers. Where do you see this as it now heads to the House? Are you willing to accept some of those changes? Do you need to accept those changes?
We're happy to have his ideas in the mix. Our members are interested in those, and our members have other ideas as well that they're interested in exploring. So we welcome his suggestions, and we'll be working hard to see what we can incorporate.
The cost of the proposals that the governor put out there yesterday would be about $1.9 billion. On the House side, does that seem like a realistic figure to put toward tax relief, or do you think more money needs to be left over for flexibility of the general fund?
Those are both good goals. We certainly want and intend to pass really meaningful tax reductions in the places where we think they can do the most good, particularly for low and middle income people, also to improve our economic competitiveness. We also want to be sure that we have a sustainable budget. And, and so I don't know that there's a magic number there, but we'll be looking at each of the governor's tax reduction ideas, each of the tax reduction ideas that are in the bill that came over from the Senate, and potentially others to try to find the right balance.
I'm curious about the updated revenue forecast from Monday. Is there, in preparation for the supplemental budget being released, I think next week sometime, is there anything that from that forecast that has influenced kind of the talk around the upcoming supplemental budget?
It provides some breathing room, and it provides the ability to take another look at some of the reductions that that were planned to be in our proposed operating budget. Some of the most difficult reductions are the ones that we can start by reevaluating. It also is an opportunity for us to have more reserves at both the end of the current and the next biennium. So it's positive. We did also see caseload increases in a number of programs, so it's not that full amount is not of the full amount of the increased revenue forecast is not all available for new spending. Some of it is already taken up by maintenance level increases, but it is a net positive, and it makes our job a little bit less daunting.
Does it change anything at all in terms of how you all are viewing the income tax or any of the other tax proposals?
You know, the millionaire's tax is really about long-term fiscal sustainability, long-term tax reform. And the revenue forecast is good news for our short-term problem, but I don't think it changes how I'm thinking about the need to engage in deep tax reform.
Any shorter-term taxes, like the cigarette tax or anything else that's still on the table?
I'm just going to jump in here to say we're still dealing with massive cuts from the federal government when it comes to health care, mental health, substance use disorder, homelessness, victim services. So I'm glad we have a positive forecast, but the cuts our state has experienced because of the federal government are tremendous. And so I always love to take opportunities to celebrate, but there are real problems on the horizon on access to health care and how it's going to limit really preventative care or early intervention. I spend a lot of time talking to our healthcare providers, especially mental health and substance use disorder providers. And, I was speaking at the NAMI lobby day just the other day, and there are real concerns on what is going to happen to people. So the need is far greater than the resources we currently have. And there really is no way for the state to meet that need without the federal government being a partner. And what they have done in the last year and a half has created a much larger problem for us. Like, I used to love, I attend a lot of national conferences, and I used to love talking about our low uninsured rate. And that's gone because we really relied on subsidies to make sure people in the state can get access to health care. So I do want to rejoice in the good news we had, but just to understand that that is very tiny compared to the problem that we're dealing with and no longer having the federal government as a partner who can help us with providing for the most vulnerable amongst us.
I want to ask, there were three bills, one sponsored by Democrat Alicia Rule to address the increase in child deaths and kids kind of languishing in these drug-addicted homes. I know Rule's bill got a hearing, but no vote out of committee. The other two did not get hearings. And there was also Senate Bill 5071, which passed the Senate with near unanimous support to update the endangerment with a controlled substance statute. So I know the House has not taken up that bill. Senator Braun mentioned in the media avail yesterday that he thinks this is the fourth year in a row that that's been blocked. So specifically, Representative Fitzgibbon, since you engaged with Rep. Couture on the House floor so passionately Monday night, can you explain why we're going to go yet another year without fixing this?
Well, I believe did Senator Braun's bill come over just this session?
Torres.
Or the Torres bill? Yeah, I mean, I believe there's time for that committee to consider that proposal. So
is it going to be considered?
I can't speak for that committee and what their intentions are. I do know that they've been looking at the issue of child welfare very seriously. There was a bill by Representative Ortiz-Self that did move out of that committee to address critical incidents in child welfare settings. There's an honest difference of opinion among legislators about what is the best way to keep kids safe. And, you know, what I took exception to on the floor was the assertion that some of us care more about that than others. I don't think that's true. I think that all 98 House members care about keeping kids safe, and we are not unanimous about the right way to go about that and the right way to also support keeping families together. I know that committee has been looking at that issue and will continue to look at that issue in the context of the bill from Senator Torres that came over.
But if we don't change the imminent harm standard for another year, then it's still going to be very difficult to get those kids in safe environments. And so I'm wondering why those bills aren't moving.
Can I just, that presumes that that is the solution to the problem.
That taking them out?
The question about the imminent harm, you're presuming that that's the solution. When you look at the work that we did a couple of years ago to make it more clear to the courts about what they could take into consideration with regard to removal, the critical incidents have shrunk dramatically in that time since we passed that bill. I would never argue that it's the only thing that we should do. So we are continuing to look at what we should do. Honestly, from my public health perspective, what would have been best is 10 years ago when there was a proposal to offer nurse family home visiting across the state of Washington to all families in need, that the Republicans opposed vociferously and we weren't able to do. That is the thing that would have actually helped the very, very best and most. But we're not able to get support for that. So, and it's because they had a very different perspective on doing that. So that's one of the challenges that we always come up to. I've actually been convening members in a bipartisan way to talk about this in the House. And I think it's 100% clear that all members share a common interest in this. It's figuring out the right path that will have the effect that we'd like it to have for kids in the state and families.
On child welfare on the Senate side, was there a reason that Senator Wilson's two bills on that issue didn't go forward before the cutoff?
We heard concerns from a lot of stakeholders, and I think that caused members to believe that we needed to make a pause and continue working on those policies. So I suspect that we'll see them next year.
Do you expect specific investments to address the critical incident issue beyond what's in the governor's budget in your own supplemental budget?
Yes.
The amendment put forward by Senator Elias on the House or Senate floor on Monday rolls back a lot of the sales tax increases adopted by the legislature last year, except on advertising services. I was wondering if you could just expand a little bit on why that wasn't included in the Elias amendment.
It's just a matter of the money, the amount of money that we felt like we had to available for tax reductions. And, you know, we would have had the votes to pass the bill with no changes in the Senate. We agreed in consultation with the House that we would go ahead and take that amendment. But we wanted to leave an adequate amount of money for House members to put their stamp on the bill and include their priorities. So, you know, ultimately, I think we've said pretty consistently it's good. The end product is going to be somewhere between 25 and 40% of the money going to tax reductions. And, you know, this brought us up to having a sort of consistent level of somewhere between 18 and 20%. So that leaves room for our colleagues in the House to do what they need to do to get the right votes together.
I would just say as a policy matter, my perspective on the amendment accepted in the Senate was that the sales tax on those services hits, that was in the Elias amendment, it hits folks in a very broad-based way. Large business, small business, school districts, entrepreneurial businesses. So this was a way that we could... Nonprofits, yes. This was a way that we could look and actually be very helpful across many sectors. And so that's why those were very high priority. When we talked about this with the Senate, we thought that they were very high priority reductions.
Can you talk a little bit about what happened on the Senate floor yesterday evening with the transmission bill and Senator Short's request for it to be read in full? Was the expectation that transmission would move in tandem with the cultural resources bill, and did that kind of blow up that plan? I guess maybe we can start there, just in general reaction, and was that the plan?
Yes, I think we had been very clear since last year that there was a desire to move both a cultural resource bill that would protect those interests for tribes and the transmission bill at the same time. The challenge is these are very complicated issues that have a lot of collateral consequences, right? And in parallel, we wanted to make sure that we were not compromising the work that we've done over the last several years on housing and endangering our ability to do the middle housing work. So there were real policy questions that we were wrestling with up until literally 4:35 yesterday afternoon. And that's the moment at which the votes came together for a path on the cultural resources bill. Unfortunately, by that time, we were sort of into that zone where we had three bills that we wanted to try to accomplish, and we really had the ability only to do two of them. So, and then as it turns out, because of the order of things, we accomplished only one, which was the environmental crimes bill from Senator Trudeau.
And from a procedural standpoint, there's no way the majority could have did an override of the request or the demand to read the bill in full?
No, it's not even a minority versus majority thing. That isn't a right of each individual senator to request or demand a reading in full. Which I guess one thing that I would say, and part of the reason that you don't see that very often, is that we work really, really hard to maintain a good working relationship with our minority. We bring a lot of their bills to the floor. We talk to them about what we're going to do. We give them notice of all the bills that we're going to be running and give them a good chance to bring up amendments. For example, I walked the floor striker on the millionaire's tax over to Senator Braun and talked to him for about 10 minutes on Friday during floor action, and let him know that this was coming and this was the time frame and everything. Those kinds of investments in what's really just basic kindness and human decency pay huge dividends, because then you don't have surprising things happen. So it caught us a little off guard that Senator Short did that, but she was completely within her right to do it, and they were frustrated. I think it turned out afterwards, as we talked, that they thought something else was going on that was not going on. But it's fine. We will continue to work on both of those issues, and we'll be back in January of next year.
The governor.
If I could just add one thing, I think certainly Senator Short is well within her rights to ask for the bill to be read in full. It is bad news for energy affordability, for job growth, and for the reliability of our electrical system. So I think that's what was lost in her making that choice.
Well, the governor said he has some concerns about the millionaire's tax. He also said he's optimistic it will get passed this session. Do you all share in that optimism? I mean, there's a supplemental budget. You have 3 weeks left to deal with everything else you want to deal with. Will this get done, from what you know?
I share his optimism.
This morning, the members of Color Caucus in the House met with the governor to talk about this. It was one of the agenda items, but a number of other policy interests that were important to the caucuses. And, I think there was a commitment from the governor and from Chair Berg and other members to make sure communication and ideas are shared so that we can meet that end, which is a shared goal committed to by the governor and the folks in our caucus, for the members of Color Caucus this morning. And I think you've heard that from our leadership table as well.
I share the optimism, although I am the person who is the one who's constantly saying to people, it's too early to give up hope on anything. So I'm always very hopeful about lots of things, but I would say this year in particular, I just felt like we had a number of bills that were in challenging situations for floor votes that members really worked hard in a bipartisan way on those bills to get them to be, it might not mean we had Republican votes for them, but there was less opposition and more willingness to move a bill. And so I'm not trying to say that we will get Republican support necessarily on the millionaire's tax, although I welcome that and, welcome their input on the bill. But many things came together very late that allowed us to just keep on rolling through bills that we thought maybe weren't going to be able to move this year. And we're able to move. So that was, I think that's great work, and that's the kind of work that the people of this state want us to do.
Senator, I would just add to that we've had very good communication and collaboration with the House Republicans this year, and I think that's really positive. There's no question we had a number of tension, high tension and some meltdowns with them on the floor last year, and it's just really nice to have the kind of good communication that we have with them, which certainly does not mean we agree about everything, but we passed a number of bills that were important to them.
But you don't need Republican support on the millionaire's tax.
No.
Do you have all the Democrat support? The Senate had 3 that didn't vote for it. I mean,
Well, it just got to the House. So we're going to be having a hearing on the bill next week, and then the Finance Committee will weigh in with amendments and on thoughts on. I think the structure is pretty. Well, we might have some technical things, but my guess is not too much of that anymore. This is really about the balance of what do we look at in terms of the tax relief kind of side of things and stuff like that. So. We have really good support in our caucus for the bill, but I haven't I'm not vote counting it yet because I think we have to get it to the space where we're kind of done working on it, ready for it to go to the floor. So, didn't mean to interrupt you.
Senator Dingell, your bill on addressing the tort liability issue passed the Senate, and I'm curious if you have a sense about what it would do to address the underlying issue of the expanding tort liability and where the bill might go from here in terms of.
Thank you for that. Actually, that's what I was doing before I came here. We had over an hour-long meeting with the association, with schools, cities, counties, and the state, including the governor's office. And there are more amendments that are coming. There will be a sub for the hearing. I believe it's going to be scheduled next week. So we continue working on it. And what I want to make sure is clear to everybody is that the state of Washington continues to be the state that provides the most access to justice to survivors of sexual assault, and that is not going to change. What we have is a process that for really older claims, in really making sure that we have a process that works for survivors as well as for the state and its political subdivisions. We're still going to be the state that has the most transparency and accountability in the country. So it is in the House. I am hopeful that they will get it across the finish line. But we are an outlier when it comes to the level of exposure we have for liability issues. And I 100% believe that survivors have a right to be compensated for harm that is done to them by the state. And it's really about making sure we have a process in place that helps all parties. And so there were 3 things that were very critical that the trial attorneys had said right at the beginning when we started talking about this. One was they wanted to make sure that the right to a jury trial always existed for the survivor, and that is what is in the bill. That has always been true. That there be no cap on damages to the survivor, and that is true. That is in the bill. And the third thing is they didn't want any caps on attorney fees. A lot of other people have opinions on that one, but that is also in the bill. So this has always met all three of those requirements in ensuring that we continue to elevate survivors. But it is creating a process that is consistent with what a lot of other states do. Other states also deny a jury trial after they go through a claims commission process. And in our bill, we always allow the survivor to exert their right to a jury trial. So I'm hopeful that it'll continue in the House and get to the governor's desk.
Do you have a sense about the underlying fiscal concern, particularly for counties and the municipalities? Do you have a sense of what the arbitration process would do to bend the curve that's been going up and to the right?
There are a lot of guesses at this point in time. We do know that other states that have a commission, they do see reductions. A lot of reductions are actually in attorney fees because you're creating a process where you're not spending that much money on attorneys. And I had a good conversation today where, we created that expedited track and a hearing track, and our schools actually believe that many of their claims can go through an expedited track, and that expedited track actually doesn't even require the survivor to have an attorney. So it is really about creating a space where they can access justice in a much more expedient way without necessarily having to go through an attorney. They're welcome to bring an attorney if they want, but I think that will help provide that. We actually had our cities just ask if they can be part of this process if both parties agree. And so that's an amendment that will be seen in the House, is providing that option for cities if both parties agree to go through the Claims Commission process. So we continue to build on that work, and again, I'm always optimistic.
The Senate bill to lower the impaired driving threshold to 0.05 BAC is up for a public hearing tomorrow. Do you all think that this is the year that this is going to actually cross the finish line?
I have no idea.
Where's your magic 8 ball?
I don't know. I'll have to get my predictor pen. I think I've been clear. I've been very supportive of this bill, but we just have to see where the caucus is at. And the transportation has a lot of members of the caucus on that committee, so I think it's great that that's where it is, getting a lot of exposure and kind of vetting. And I think Rep. Donaghy was the prime sponsor in the House, and she's on the Transportation Committee. So,
and I would just add members of both caucuses.
Yeah.
Right.
The House bill that calls for transferring the left one pension funding to the CCA account, does that have a path in the Senate?
I think last year there were pretty divergent ideas about how to handle this dramatic overfunding of the left one pension plan between House and Senate. It seems like over the interim there have been really productive conversations, and Senator Robinson has gotten much more comfortable with the House approach. So my sense is that we are headed in that direction. I don't know, is that something that we're moving this year, or is that a next year thing?
The bill to terminate and restate left Plan 1, we hope to pass this year. The resources wouldn't become available until probably 2029. And that CCA transfer that you asked about is that's a House proposal, and we've raised debt for the Senate to consider, but that's not something that we've agreed on yet. But we'll be advocating for it.
And we have regular engagement with the two budget teams long before the budgets become public. So it is an idea that Representative Fitzgibbon and company have done a good job of socializing over the course of months, and I suspect that there's a lot of openness to it on our side.
There's a bill that to assess a tax on Apple for the Apple Health for businesses, employee, kind of Walmart tax, people on Medicaid. What's the prospects for that this year? It got a single hearing. I know it's had previous hearings previous years, but it's a significant. It's like a $1.5 billion, I think, tax assessment. It's a really
interesting bill because it's hitting us at a very different time in our history. So yes, it has been, the idea has kicked around in some form for a while. And just to be clear for everyone, this is an idea essentially that employers who have more than just part-time employees who are not giving health care to their employees, and then their employees wind up using taxpayer-funded Medicaid as their health care, those employers ought to help kick in to pay for the Medicaid premiums. So, look, one of the main challenges that we've had when this was referred to as the Walmart tax in many years past was that we had no way of tracking who was where, who was using Medicaid, where did they work. One of the great ironies about the massive cuts coming from the federal government is that they're going to require us to build the IT systems that will let us know exactly where all the people are working who are getting Medicaid benefits. And so, now one of the major sort of technological hurdles that we would have had to be able to enforce such an idea is going to be cleared away by this requirement from H.R. 1. So, I don't.
Investment of $170 million or so from that the feds aren't giving.
Yeah,
us.
well, and look, Senator Dingro was mentioning before, like the massive benefit cuts and threat to the good work that we've done over the last 15 years in terms of reducing our uninsured rate. We don't want that to go backwards. So I think it's very much a conversation that we're interested in having. The bill is set for a potential vote in the Ways and Means Committee on tomorrow afternoon, I guess. So we'll have that conversation there about how we want to proceed. I should add that, not surprisingly, there are a lot of employers who are very concerned about that. So, that's the tension that goes on all the time in our process, and we'll be talking about how to reconcile all of those different interests.
And I'll just add that Senator Alvarado has been working really well with our business community. They update me after every meeting they've had with her. And, I think they're legitimate issues on, who's paying it, how, when, assessing it. But I'm really grateful that everyone is engaging on this bill. But to Senator Peterson's point, this is something the federal government is making us do, and they are requiring us to confirm whether people on Medicaid are working, and we have to make sure that our companies are doing their fair share, that if the state is providing them health insurance, that they pitch in and pay for that employee to have access to the medical care that they need.
I have particular concern for the nonprofit community, especially ones that are reliant on Medicaid funded. They don't have, they're you basically cap how much they make, and then charging a tax, they said, would be catastrophic.
That is one of the concerns that has been raised, and I've seen the long list of issues. And I don't know what's going to be in the sub, but I know that Senator Alvarado has been having a lot of those conversations, so I look forward to that.
So it appears the initiative, the bill dubbed by critics as the initiative killer bill, is dead for the year. What happened to the bill?
It didn't pass. It didn't have votes.
Yeah.
It seemed from your side early on in session that there was momentum for that and that it was a priority. So just kind of wondering from your perspective why it didn't go.
That wasn't a House.
I think if any member that you talk to, or group of members will have their own set of priorities that are, maybe specific to them. If I'm the prime sponsor of a bill, it's often a priority of mine, but it takes time to socialize that as a priority to the rest of my caucus, and I think that's probably an example here. But it was an idea that folks had and a lot of support, but not enough to get to the point where we were passing it in this year.
Yeah, and our priorities were affordability, fighting back against the Trump administration, and having a sustainable budget, right? It was not one of our priorities, but it was an interesting idea that got a hearing in the Senate State Government Committee, and then it didn't ultimately make it to the cut list in a short session. So,
Senator Saldana's farm worker unionization bill was on the made it through, but it didn't make it through yesterday. Do you have a sense what happened with that? I know it had been a priority of hers, leaving for hopefully another office for her.
Yeah, I mean, it's a similar story. It ultimately didn't have the votes yet in our caucus. I guess what I would say is Senator Saldana did some significant work to bring together the two farm worker unions in the state. There was, I think, more work that will need to be done before that idea can advance to make sure that the agriculture community more generally has had a chance to weigh in and figure out how best to make that happen.
Senator Peterson, you were quoted as saying that you'd heard anecdotally of people looking to move because of the state's estate tax, or to avoid it. Are you concerned at all that the income tax might push more to do the same? And why are
No, the opposite. Look, the difference, here's a tale of two taxes, and I think this is just a really important lesson for me over the last few years as we've worked on tax policy, and I have worked more on tax policy. When we do well, we're kind of unexceptional, vanilla, regular in terms of our tax policy, right? And it isn't an outlier. And I think, for example, with the capital gains proposal, what we figured out is, guess what? If you have a kind of plain vanilla rate and a tax that is charged in most jurisdictions in the country, like the vast majority of jurisdictions in the country, doesn't actually drive much behavior at all. When you have, with the estate tax, there are 17, I think as I understand it, states that have a state level estate tax. We were tied already for the highest rate in the country. And then last year we increased the top marginal rate from 20% to 35%. And, sticking out from the crowd in that way causes people to notice. And I think, again, anecdotally, we don't have evidence yet in terms of tax collections that this is actually has changed people's behavior. But I think we have heard from lawyers and tax accountants and then some individuals that when they're at that point, and if they have, number one, they have to have that level of resources, right? You're talking about multiple millions of dollars. And then they're at that point in their life where they're really focused on that. There are people who just have made the calculation that they don't want to give a third of their estate to the state of Washington. And so they're going to take some action to make Arizona, where that used to be their second home, into their main home, right? So, or Nevada or whatever, right? So I think with the millionaire's tax, by contrast, the top marginal rate, 9.9%, that is not out of line with a large number of the 41 other states that have some form of a personal income tax. I'll say in addition that you have to have quite a bit of money before you're even doing better in Idaho than you would do in Washington. If you think about with the $1 million deduction on which there's a 0% rate, you have to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.9 million of income per year or more before you would do better in Washington than with Idaho's flat 4.4% rate. So long story short, I don't actually think with the, there may be individual people, but I don't think that there's going to be any significant change in taxpayer location as a result of the passage of the tax.
And we, Simone and I discussed this before, but the Association of Washington Businesses survey, which they made a big splash about, that, all these business leaders were looking to leave, said that they were looking to move to Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, or Arizona. Right? Well, unless they pick Wyoming, they would be paying an income tax in those other states. Right? We are an outlier in not having one.
On the estate tax, didn't you know it would be an outlier when you passed it?
I think we did. I think we did. I don't think we anticipated impacts in the feedback that we got because we didn't get that kind of feedback as we were passing it. I'm not And
that bill did
might
some other good things too. I mean, it also brought up, we were an outlier in terms of our minimum estate level. And so it brought it up from 2 million to 3 million and then indexed it for inflation. And so that was all part of the package. I think for most of the members as they process, I shouldn't speak for everybody else, but I think for me, I will just say, as I processed that, it was like, well, that's making it more progressive. We're going to take a lot of estates out of the tax that are smaller, and that where it might just be a family home, for example, that's in the estate. And on the other hand, we're in the context of trying to balance a difficult budget, we're asking the wealthiest people to do a little bit more. So now experience has told us that that we might have overshot.
We will always reserve the right to reevaluate policies we've passed based on how we see them being implemented. We've very rarely gotten a policy exactly right the first time out of the gate.
I don't know. I've had some really good bills. Just so we're clear.
But most of the work that we do in the legislature is fixing the work of our predecessors. So
I always I sign every member's first bill, and I always ask them, do you really like your bill? And they'll kind of look at me, well, yeah. I'm like, well, because you'll be doing amendments to this bill every session that you're here to improve it and get feedback. And they're all like, really? I'm like, yes, you likely will. So that's the way it works, because the world changes, right? And
we find out new information.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody.
I actually really enjoyed the Tale of the Two Taxes.